Can you hear me now? Okay. What were the colonists' attitudes toward the new world environment? I want to make sure that you can hear me, guys. Hala Sharif. Hala? Can you hear me now, Hala?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'll start. So, for the colonists, you know that the colonists are those who came from Europe and settled, the settlers who came from Europe for different reasons we mentioned before, to settle or to stay or to colonize North America. The people did not belong to the land. Native Americans belonged to this land, but the colonists, they did not belong to the land. Quite the opposite. Land belonged to people. And this land was to be claimed by Britain, France, and Spain. As we said before, Britain, France, Spain, and maybe the Netherlands or Holland occupied parts of this new land. It was measured, the land, divided, bought, sold, and governed as the property of European kings and trading companies. The Puritans, I think you know the Puritans, religious people who wanted to build the model city on the top of a hill, remember? Filled with religious zeal, religious desire, may have wanted to build a city upon a hill. But the hill would still belong to the King of England. Again, in their opinion, in the colonists' opinion, land belonged to the man, not the opposite. Okay, they divided it, measured it, sold it, bought it, but after all, it belonged to the king, to kings. Dream versus reality. During the 17th century, the colonists' attitude toward the American environment was a blend of dream and reality. The dream was to create a theocracy. A theocracy is a state where religious rules rule this place or govern this place. It's governed or ruled by religion and religious people. An earthly, this is the definition. A theocracy is an earthly community governed by religious principles. The reality was to avoid starving to death or falling prey to cold, disease, or animals. Again, here we have a dream. The dream is to create a theocracy, a state governed by religious rules and principles. And the reality, if we come down to real life, they wanted to avoid starving to death or falling prey to cold or disease or animals. The colonists, the Europeans, saw the continent's raw beauty, virgin beauty, rich resources, and awe-inspiring possibilities, great possibilities. This is what was called the American dream. They also felt every day the hard facts of staying alive. This all is real. This is something related to life. Independent, place, and people. I'll just check that you can hear me well now. I'll ask Martina. Martina, where is Martina? Martina, can you hear me well now? Martina Munir? Martina? So Martina left. Noreen, can you hear me? Noreen? Noreen? I'll ask Tadros. Tadros, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dee. Okay. Independent place.
هو أنا الوحيدة اللي مش سامعة مستر طيب؟
Excuse me.
لا أنا كمان مش سامعة
لا هو
حاجة
الصوت بيقطع.
I do my best. Wallahi, it's out of my hand. I don't know what to do. Can you hear me well
والله
now?
ما سمعتش حضرتك.
I can't
لا
stop the session.
الكلام مش مجمع.
طب أعمل إيه؟ What can I do? I'll complete the session and try the video. If it's bad, I won't upload it. Okay? I'm so sorry. Independent.
Excuse me?
I'll complete the session this way and then listen to the video. If the voice is bad, I'll not upload it. Okay? Can you hear me?
والله مش عارفة اسمع حضرتك بتقول ايه دلوقتي.
طب أعمل إيه برضو؟ You know, maybe I'm the only teacher at school now and I have all the internet. All teachers work from home. I work from school, wallahi. Can you hear me now? I'll start. Independent place and people. By the 18th century, Europeans had gained a more secure foothold in America, a more secure place. Tree by tree, they had tamed a portion of the wilderness and built towns, roads, schools, and churches. They began to worry less about survival. They are safe now, and more about self-government. They want to govern themselves. They want to rule themselves. They want to have their own independence from the kings. They began to ask, we live in an independent place far away from our kingdoms back in Europe, so why aren't we an independent people? Why do we still belong to the British Empire? The effects of the Enlightenment began to set in, and people realized that they could belong to themselves rather than to a monarch. Why do we need to belong to a king? We are independent. We live far away from the empire. We can protect ourselves. We are safe now. We can ask for our independence. The spirit of self-reliance or self-rule that had faced down the wilderness was the same spirit that would face down European kings. Those people in those newfound lands wanted to have their own independence. The place itself had taught Americans how to be Americans with all its features and characteristics. How did attitudes toward nature show up in literature? How did attitudes toward nature show up in literature? The close relationship between Native Americans and nature showed up in myths and legends. In these stories, people communicate with mountains and rivers. People and animals talk with each other, as we will see later in the literature of the Native Americans or Indians. People and animals talk with each other and sometimes even change into each other. People become animals and animals become people. Human beings and nature live in harmony. This is in the literature of the Native Americans. When the earliest explorers, the Europeans, searched the continent, their responses to the land appeared in their journals and the reports and letters they sent back home. Cabeza, Dovaka recorded the natural wonders of the New World. William Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation, the finest written work of the first European Americans. Again, Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation, this is considered the finest written work of the first European Americans, is filled with detailed descriptions of creating a colony in a place so delightful and so dangerous. Errand into the wilderness. You know, an errand means a task. Here we talk about a task or a job into the wilderness. America's first literary family, Richard, Increase, and Cotton Mather. These are the first literary family, the Richard family, the Increase family, and Cotton Mather. Saw the environment from a religious point of view because they were Puritans. Their writings describe a mission to combat evil in an uncivilized place. In time, this idea of the wilderness as a dark place of evil profoundly affected other writers. Forests and wild places play a large role, physically and symbolically, in the writings of American writers who would come later, including Washington Irving, James Fenimore Cooper, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Mark Twain. These are some of the names of famous American writers later. Place and nation. As the colonies developed, the power of reason, not religion, the power of reason, enlightenment, began to make the continent a more hospitable place, a more welcoming place, an attractive place to other people, new people who come. Technology improved and agriculture flourished, prospered, improved. In letters from an American farmer, this is a work of art, Jean du Crevecoeur even used the imagery of growing plants to emphasize the important idea that living in this particular place turned Europeans into Americans. She says, in Europe, they were as so many useless plants. They withered and were mowed down, cut down by want, hunger, and war. But now, by the power of transplantation, as if you take these plants or these people, she refers to people here, European people, who left Europe back and came to America as withered or faded plants, which were transplanted in America. Like all other plants, they have taken root and flourished. The very name of the new nation reveals the influence of place. The United States of America is made of separate, distinct places. We have 13 states, as you remember, united into one, a federal republic. Republic, not a kingdom. We no longer have kings here. We go back to the question, what makes American literature American? What are the characteristics that make American literature American, not French, not British? American literature naturally shares the basic characteristics of all literature. It's literature after all. Characters, there are characters in the American literature. Plots, settings, images, and themes. However, American literature is much more than literary works written by Americans. It also embodies certain ideas, evokes certain places, and tells stories of certain kinds of characters. There are qualities that distinguish American literature and make it a unique cultural expression. What are these characteristics? What is a theme and how does it find expression in literature? I think you all know what a theme is. A theme is the central idea or message or insight that a literary work reveals. This play, for example, talks about love. This poem talks about, for example, war, or living in exile, or hatred, or jealousy, and so on. A theme is not the subject of a work, but rather the insight, the hidden idea that the work reveals about the subject. A work reveals its themes through characters, words, and actions, through details of setting and plot, through imagery, and even through language and style. What were early American themes? What topics did early Americans write about? 3 themes. This is important, guys, if you can hear me well. 3 themes dominate early American writing. Theme number 1, wilderness. Writers revealed insights into the nature and meaning of the wilderness by the details they used to describe it and by the stories they told of their physical, political, and spiritual struggles with it. But most of them wrote about their struggle with nature and the wilderness of nature. This theme was one of the most important themes in early American literature. So number one is wilderness. Wilderness. Number two, community. In public writing, such as pamphlets and newspapers, colonists and patriots convey the central message that America was a unique combination of community and independence. A new community. A community completely different from their community back in Europe. Number one, again, is wilderness. These are the most famous themes of early American literature. Wilderness, again. Number two, the idea of community and the idea of being independent and uniqueness. Individualism in history and memoir and in everything from laws to lyric poems, writers made clear that self-reliance and individualism are fundamental American values. We are completely different from our land back in Europe. Okay, we are again individual. We are again distinguished. We are again an independent community. What is uniquely American about those themes? So again, we have three themes here: wilderness, community, and individualism. What is uniquely American about those themes? The place. Americans recognized that they were in a unique place, a new world, only a small part of which they had even seen. Nothing in their European experience had prepared them for the splendors and the terrors of the American wilderness. Because back in Europe, the whole continent of Europe is as large as America. Those who came from Britain lived in a very small area, as I told you before. They didn't imagine, they couldn't imagine that they would see this, let's say, wild wilderness, this large virgin land and forests, animals, this large variety of creatures. Sometimes America seemed to be the Garden of Eden. You know, the Garden of Eden, okay? A newly created place of natural wealth. Sometimes it seemed to be an enemy or a punishment because the weather was harsh. They weren't accustomed with or familiar with the wild animals living there, the wild plants, the mountains, the rivers, okay? A punishment or a source of fear and death. These themes entered into the American literary imagination. So the place had an effect. The place was vast, new, full of challenge, fearful, and so on. The past, when Americans wrote, they were aware of the many traditional European subjects and themes that were now of no importance to them because they live in a different land. After all, there had been no Middle Ages or Renaissance in America because America is new. They didn't have Middle Ages or Renaissance. In the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, nobody lived in America. No Europeans in large numbers lived in America. Europeans had medieval romances that told tales of knights and chivalry. Americans did not. They did not have medieval, you know, medieval belonging to this age, as I told you, 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries. Europeans had Shakespeare's tragedies of kings and princes. Americans did not. Europeans had a heritage of elegant and witty writing. Americans had a plain, zero, a straightforward way of writing. Americans did have histories and journals, prayers and sermons, speeches and essays. They even had some poems, but all of these imitated European styles. With the turn of the 19th century, the year 1800, American writers would begin to forge unique ways of expressing their unique experience. So Americans had no past, no literary past. They didn't have Shakespeare or the plays of famous writers and the poems of famous poets, but they created their own unique experience. The vision, the themes of independence and self-reliance are at the heart of the Americans' vision of themselves. How did they see themselves as a new and unique people? They knew they were creating not only a new nation, but a new kind of nation. That sense of newness marked Americans as a people of youth, innocence, optimism, risk-taking, and boundless originality. So, how did Americans envisage themselves? How did they see themselves? They saw themselves as a people of youth, innocence, optimism, risk-taking, and boundless originality. The second question, how does literature shape or reflect society? What social and political forces affected early American literature? I think we mentioned this again and again. We have Puritan ideas and the Enlightenment, or the reason. Puritan or Puritanism, from the first Puritan or Puritanism influenced just about every aspect of colonial life. Again and again, guys, Puritanism means the rule of religion and religious principles. The impulse to escape to a new world and build a reformed and uncorrupted society, the model city we talked about upon a hill, shaped Puritan lawmaking, social relations, and daily lives. Their daily life was ruled by religion. All of them were religious people. Belief in predestination, John Calvin's doctrine that God has already decided who will be saved, made Puritans search every thought, action, and word for signs of grace. But they believe that God decided or has already decided who will be saved. In hymns, sermons, histories, journals, and autobiographies, they aimed only for self-examination and spiritual insight. All the writings were about religion and religious values and principles. The Enlightenment, on the other hand, this is the opposite. By the 18th century, the power of reason, the power of mind, asserted itself in America. In speeches, pamphlets, essays, and newspaper articles, the spirit of the time called for debate, clear thinking, and reorganization of the political situation. The Declaration of Independence, for example, is not an outcry or an anarchic demand. It is a reasoned document, a controlled statement of the national or rational argument for independence. It was totally something related to the ideas, the thoughts. It didn't refer to any religious ideas. Native Americans and African Americans. Relations with Native Americans, the Indians, and the continued enslavement of African Americans left deep marks in American literature. In histories and captivity narratives, we have some record of relationships between colonists and Native Americans. Relationships that ranged from trust to distrust, from friendship to hatred. In narratives left by both slaves and slaveholders, we find heart-rending stories of individuals, families, and communities scarred by slavery. I'll do this page and finish. What were the major roles of early American writers? Again, what were the major roles? This is important, of early American writers. Writers not only reflect the social and political forces of their society, they also influence those forces. As we said before, writers influence the community. They are not only the mirrors of their cultures and their communities. They can also be the fire that make those communities burn with hope, anger, love, idealism, and creativity. They can ignite revolutions, as I said before. Writer as oral poet and historian. But this is one of the roles of early American writers. The writer was an oral poet and historian. Native American oral poets held places of vital importance for their tribes. They were very important. If you are an oral poet or a historian in a Native American tribe, you are an important person. They told each community's story, related its history, and honored its heroes. Those European Americans who wrote journals and histories fulfilled a similar role, recording the social and political events that gave meaning to their community's experience. The narratives of De Cardenas and Capeza de Vaca and William Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation give us perspective on our own heritage. So, the first role was the role of oral poets and historians. They were very important in the community, and they reflected the facts of the community, either Native American writers or oral poets, or European writers. Writer as preacher and lawmaker. Another role of the early American writers, they were preachers. A preacher is a person who preaches people about religion, and lawmakers. The writers of hymns and sermons believed that their role was to articulate the will of God, to speak for God. Cotton Mather and Jonathan Edwards explained for their communities the working of divine providence in the wilderness. And they did their utmost to instill the fear of God into every member of their trembling audiences. They wanted to plant the fear of God into the souls of the people. The writers of America's laws and political documents had a different role, to articulate the will of the people, not the will of God. Thomas Paine's pamphlets, Patrick Henry's speeches, and Thomas Jefferson's multifaceted writing survive today not only as a part of history but also as literature. A writer as autobiographer, again, the first role was oral poet and historian. Number 2, as a preacher and lawmaker. Number 3, as an autobiographer. The autobiographer's role goes beyond answering the basic question, what did I do and why did I do it? Because an autobiography is the story of someone's life written by himself or herself. The autobiographer also asks, why should you be interested in my life to write about it? I write about my life. What makes you as a reader interested to complete reading about my own life? What did I learn from it? What can you learn from it? The slave narrative of Oloda Equiano helped Americans face their own history and ultimately do something about it. Benjamin Franklin's autobiography combined a fascinating life story with explorations of essential American values. I'll stop here. Next time, inshallah, tomorrow, inshallah, we'll start studying some oral traditions of the Native Americans. Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether my voice was clear during the last 20 minutes. If you have any question, please put your hands up. And please focus on the items I focused on during this session. Okay? Try to join our Facebook page. So far, I haven't given you any task. Please join as soon as possible. The 8 people or the 9 people who haven't joined our Facebook group yet, please do as soon as possible. Thank you very much. If you have a question, put your hand up. Nobody has a question? I just want to make sure that you were, or my voice was heard clearly. Jana Walid, good morning. Jana?
Hi, Mr.
Morning. Was my voice clear during the last 20 minutes?
يعني not clear قوي بس كان تمام يعني.
So. طيب. والله it's out of my hand, Jana. Sorry all. You know, as I said before, all teachers work from school today. I'm here at school alone, almost alone. I try to do my best because here for sure it's better than the internet at home. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Jana. I'll end the session now.
No problem, Mr.
See you tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
إن شاء الله. Bye.